How much did Star Wars really cost the Walt Disney Company? That's the question we're going to try to answer today. Many folks out there will hearken back to 2012 on October 1st when George Lucas and Bob Iger of the Walt Disney Company announced the Lucasfilm sale to Disney for $4.05 billion. But since then, Disney has spent billions upon billions more investing in the property they bought nearly 11 years ago. Now, a lot of folks out there have had questions, what did the movies that Disney produce really cost the Walt Disney Company? And today, we have that answer. And the truth, frankly, is going to shock you. Renegade Online. Well, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. From 2015 through 2019, the Walt Disney Company released 5 Disney Star Wars movies into theaters with a total retail box office haul of $5.92 billion. That's an easy number to come up with because we can publicly search it right here on places like the numbers and do the quick math. But what's more difficult is to come up with the actual costs that the Walt Disney Company would have put out to produce these 5 films. Sure, if we go back and look at each of those movies on the numbers, there would be a stated production budget. And I should say, production budget. These are the figures that Hollywood studios put out to the public ether. That doesn't mean that's what they actually spent. There's no regulatory requirement by the SEC, for example, or the Securities and Exchange Commission here in the United States to say the studios have to put out the actual expenses for any one given film. Hollywood studios, like the rest of corporate America, don't want to give away all of their secrets. They're not required to. So when you see publicly stated budgets for Hollywood pictures, take them with a grain of salt. Most of them are fairly well in line with reality, but most of the big budget movies out there, think of the big summer blockbuster type movies or Christmas blockbuster type movies, oftentimes the budgets that we see that are listed on places like the numbers are not in tune with reality. Oftentimes, they're vastly underreported for what the studio actually spent. And today, we're going to show you what the Walt Disney Company really spent to make 5 Disney Star Wars films. To get those answers, we have to look at things like United Kingdom production entities, like Foodles Production, Lunac Heavy Industries, Space Bear Industries, Stanham 50 Labs, and Carbonado Industries. If you're a little confused, don't worry. I'm going to explain. You see, when you make a major motion picture or a big television production, and if you decide to take advantage of the United Kingdom's film tax credits, you have to create a separate business entity in the UK to house all of the financial reporting for those motion picture or television productions. And that UK film tax credit returns up to 25% on all eligible expenses that are done inside of the United Kingdom. So for Hollywood studios that want to take advantage of this lucrative financial incentive, they have to file public returns in the UK. And if you know the names of these productions in relation to their actual film titles, you can go find out exactly what a company like Walt Disney spent on making something like Star Wars, all 5 of which were produced in some degree or another inside the UK. Foodles Production is better known as Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Lunac Heavy Industries is better known as Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. Space Bear Industries, better known as Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Stanham 50 Labs, better known as Solo, a Star Wars story. And Carbonado Industries, better known as Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. So now that we have identified the film production companies of these Star Wars movies, we can go in and pull up the actual financial returns that Lucasfilm and the Walt Disney Company filed in the UK in order to get their film tax credits and find out what the Walt Disney Company actually spent to make these films. In comparing budgets to reality, let's look down the list here from the numbers. The Force Awakens at $306 million. The Last Jedi at $262 million. The Rise of Skywalker, $275 million. And two Star Wars stories. Number one, Rogue One at $200 million and Solo at $275 million. That brings the grand total of the publicly reported budgets by the Walt Disney Company for those 5 Star Wars films to $1.32 billion. The problem, of course, is that we have the actual financial returns delivered to the UK, which says,
"That was a lie."
To get to the real numbers, we have to backtrack and go through all of the financial returns that Disney filed for these 5 production companies that we showed you a moment ago for the United Kingdom. What we also have to do is backtest the actual conversion ratios between the US dollar and the Great British Pound at the time of each movie's release. That should give us the most accurate representation of what each film cost when the bills came due for Disney to pay back the loans that funded the production of each of them. So let's walk back a second. $5.92 billion in gross retail box office for those 5 Disney Star Wars films. And if you've been watching us here long enough on Valiant Renegade, you've seen this breakdown before with box office rentals. And we know this from publicly reported companies like AMC Theaters that have both domestic and international exposure. We know that they report fairly consistently. Domestic rentals come in at 55%. International rentals, excluding China, come in at 43%, and China itself at 25%. And these box office rentals are what studios actually get back from theaters after places like AMC, Cinemark, Regal, so on and so forth, take their cut of the box office for exhibiting these films. These are the numbers that are most critical to Hollywood. If we break down all of those 5 Disney Star Wars films in that vein, we come up with a rental income to Disney for $2.84 billion. That is Star Wars The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker, Rogue One, and Solo. So what then did the Walt Disney Company actually spend on these 5 movies to get that $2.84 billion back in box office rentals? The reality is this. For Star Wars The Force Awakens, the Walt Disney Company actually spent $667 million US. For Rogue One, a Star Wars story, $294 million. For Star Wars The Last Jedi, $409 million. Solo, a Star Wars story, $364 million. And finally, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, $554 million. That puts the total production cost the Walt Disney Company spent to create those 5 Star Wars films at $2.29 billion US. And of course, that doesn't include 1 penny of marketing any of those 5 films. That would be an additional expense. And we can easily assume that each of those films commanded a very hefty marketing budget, at least $150 million apiece. So if we add those marketing costs in to what the total production costs were for these 5 films, we're looking at a total figure of somewhere north of $3 billion. In other words, the rentals of $2.84 billion that Disney received back from the box office did not cover everything they spent to produce and market these films. Now, as we mentioned earlier in the video, the reason Disney files these returns is to get a film tax credit in the UK. And of course, they received some credits back. And those film tax credits were the saving grace for this movie at the box office. That total film tax credit came to $384 million US, which brought the net production cost down after that tax credit to $1.9 billion. So with those UK film tax credits, yes, the Star Wars movies might have actually broken even in the theater, perhaps even made a tiny bit of profit. Now, of course, once movies leave the theater, they still have a shelf life. Things like physical media sales, things like premium video on demand in the streaming era. So yes, these movies continued to make money after they exited the big screen, and in the long run, probably collectively turned a profit. But what you really have to consider is the fact that probably somewhere to the tune of $500 million was wasted on these 5 films, with 3 of them having heavy reshoots. The Rise of Skywalker reportedly being shot almost twice. Think of that Rise of Skywalker production budget that we showed you. $554 some odd million US. That budget should have looked a lot more like The Last Jedi or even Rogue One. Think of all of the set pieces like the Millennium Falcon. Think of the props, the lightsabers, the costumes, everything that was already made and attributed to the upfront costs that were in The Force Awakens. Rise of Skywalker would have been reusing a lot of those same pieces. So how then did that movie get to be so expensive? Well, bad management on the part of Lucasfilm, just like with Rogue One and with Solo, both of which were also heavily reshot. When you begin to consider the $4 billion price tag that Disney paid to acquire this Star Wars asset, along with the rest of Lucasfilm, and then you start adding in another couple of $1 billion for 2 theme parks called Galaxy's Edge, one in California and one in Florida. How about a Star Wars hotel that they just threw in the trash a couple of months ago? You have to start wondering if Disney would have been just better off buying Lucasfilm for $4 billion and then sitting on it, meaning do absolutely nothing. The merchandise sales and the distribution for the films alone would have turned a profit for Disney over time. Merchandise sales for the Disney brand of Star Wars are basically dead. The only thing still selling for that franchise is the stuff that George Lucas created 40 years ago. Even if the 5 movies collectively somehow managed to turn $1 billion of net profits when you include post-theatrical distribution, if they even got that high, there's still the $4 billion cost to buy Star Wars to begin with that has yet to be recouped. Not to mention the $2 billion in theme parks and hotels. And then, of course, there's the $1 to $2 billion that Disney has either already spent or already committed to for a gaggle of Disney Plus shows. By the way, as a reminder, Disney Plus is still about $15 billion in the red. But add to the pile of misery other Lucasfilm properties that have also died. Things like Willow, which was thrown into a wood chipper after being on Disney Plus for just a few months. How about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny? We all know how that turned out. We've done plenty of videos on how much money that film is going to lose. Now, if you want to see a full breakdown of each film's financials, we'll put it up on the screen right here, and you can come back, pause, and look at this as long as you like. The reality at this point is that in the box office, the Star Wars movies collectively did not make money. They may have been bailed out by some UK film tax credits and some post-theatrical revenue in the long run. But let's not forget the distribution for all of those movies has been collapsed back into Disney, specifically Disney Plus. Based on the evidence out there, it seems like Disney is still a ways away from recovering that entire $4 billion purchase price just to get Star Wars in the first place. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe. And until next time, take care.